Okay, Kavika, since you asked, I'm going to be quiet. Okay, I'm going to play.
Oh, thank you.
Maku upoli mai oe, he ku'u ipo aloha, e ala o na ko'u, no ke ano ahi ahi. Mamuli a o leo, wa malune ia kino, he kino palu ko'u, I kahana a ke aloha. Wala ino ina'u, I kahanu a ka ipo, e ho'o ipo ne'i, na nea u'u ka ua. Aina mai ka puana, he ku'u ipo aloha, he ala o na ko'u, no ke ano ahi ahi. Aina mai ka puana, he ku'u ipo aloha, he ala o na ko'u, no ke ano ahi ahi. Ohai he aloha, la'i ke kino, ko mino a ka mai, me kawai maka, ke ha'i kawai, wailani hopulu ana, I o'u papalina. Kane e mai au, e au he kili, I he alona. Kumu hau e kolu, kamalani kamanui, kamai ke kahome, ona ali I holokai. E ho mai kulani, le loke o maui, I manai ia, me ke aloha, mali iho, I ka haupu, ka ua, e ho'oko ai, mali iha, I ka haupu, ka ua, I ho'oko ai. Okay. That's what Kavika said. Uncle, bring your ukulele. Okay.
Malanui.
Sure. Funny because when Mama and I get together, because when we sing, she always tells me, "Brother, you sing a little bit flat." And I go, "Oh, I can't hear it." And then Then when she dances, I tell her, Mom, your hands, they're ugly. Fix your hands. But again, that's a deal. She sing and I dance.
That was so beautiful. I could feel it all the way here. I'm in Kaimuki, and it felt like magic travel through the screen. I'm so grateful.
Thank you.
Daviana, should I slowly start the?
Sure.
Yeah, okay. Okay, I think folks are still trickling in, but I'm happy to just kind of slowly get us started now that we're all warmed up after that beautiful mele. I feel my heart going. I feel really glad to be here. Aloha, folks. For those of you I don't know, my name is Aiko Yamashiro, and I'm serving as the Executive Director of Hawaii Council for the Humanities, one of the partners on this program today. So I just wanted to share a little bit and thank some folks before we jump into the program. Hawaii Council for the Humanities, we're really proud to be a partner on this Weaving Voices series, which is a long series that we've been doing. We've been planning for some time, been working closely with a number of partners, the UH Manoa Center for Oral History and the Ethnic Studies Department there, and Hawaii Public Radio. If some of you guys heard that podcast that went up yesterday, as well as with some just amazing folks who worked on this one in particular. Well, have been working on behind the scenes on all of these programs. I wanted to thank Micah Mizukami and Lurleen McGregor, who you're gonna see, who's really helped to bring and edit these wonderful voices and be able to represent them to us today. Also, mahalo Kanoi. I saw you, who has been helping us work on this program. We're really proud that Waialua Hawaiian Civic Club is a co-sponsor on this event, where we're gonna get to visit Waialua from where we are. I wanna invite you guys, if you wanna type in the chat, if you wanna send your aloha to everyone in the room and the aina that you are calling from, so we're all connecting from many different places today. I'm calling from Kaimuki today on Oahu. I also wanted to thank one of our sponsors, the National Endowment for the Humanities, and some of their funding support helped to make today's program possible. They really believe in giving support for rich history programs, cultural programs, rich public humanities programs like this one. The program tonight does not necessarily represent their views of National Endowment for the Humanities. You're going to hear, though, from some really amazing speakers who we're going to introduce in a little bit. And then I wanted to share, I was thinking about our flyer, who was designed by this young artist named Rei Kuruhara from Hilo. And she thought about the intention of this Weaving Voices gathering, and what are we doing? We're bringing these oral histories into the present. We're making time to come together to remember these stories, to remember and to think about our futures. And so she loved, if you can see behind me, there's the Leila'i, and there's actually her grandfather's hands are some of the hands in there, and then her own hands are the other hands. And as an artist, she wanted to put that intention. It's so wonderful when we can come together across generations and weave together, spend that time together, listening to each other and imagining together and remembering. And I just feel really blessed that we get to spend some of that time today thinking about Waialua and how special it is. Really bringing forward those voices and letting those folks speak about histories and futures of Waialua, and then having all of us really learn from that, because I think we all have so much to learn from that very special place. So I feel really grateful and full. And I'm happy to turn it over to Dr. Daviana Pulmaikai McGregor, a community leader, somebody who is an aloha aina who loves many different communities, who is so good at weaving them together, and director of the Center for Oral History. And they're going to be sharing more about this particular project. So mahalo kumu Devi.
Mahalo. O nauna kahala me kalehua, he halelehua no ia na kanoi, o kauno ia, he ano ine, he li ane, ho iyo ka hiki mai o koa hiki pu me ke aloha. aloha e, aloha e, aloha e. Mahalo and aloha to everyone. Since Uncle played music, I thought inspired I should give a oli of aloha to everyone. I'm so glad everyone has joined us this late afternoon as we go into the evening. And I have some slides to share as we talk about this. Let me close my chat here. So this program is part of the continuing year-long celebration that we began in fall of 2020 of the 50th anniversary of the establishment of the Department of Ethnic Studies at UH Manoa. And these are our slogans: our future, our way. And in 1976, the Center for Oral History, at the time then called the Ethnic Studies Oral History Project, was established at UH Manoa. And they decided that their first project would be in Waialua and Haleiwa. And in summer of 1976, the staff conducted its first oral history project in this beautiful area. And the director at the time was Chad Taniguchi, and he had a staff of 9 that were interviewing. And they reasoned that Waialua Haleiwa was the site of one of the last remaining sugar plantations on Oahu, as this was a time already that Kahuku had phased out, and I think the leeward plantations were phasing out. And eventually Waialua was the last of the plantations on Oahu to phase out. But they also felt that the relative isolation of the 2 rural communities meant that social change was less rapid than in other Oahu communities. And that also, while unique, the way of life was similar to and a good example of that way of life enjoyed by small plantation communities throughout Hawaii. And they wanted to document those experiences of these small rural areas and the plantation way of life that overlapped with the Hawaiian cultural kipuka experiences as well in these rural communities. So a total of 43 individuals were interviewed between June and September 1996 by the 9 interviewers. And this resulted in 9 volumes. And they were organized by ethnic groups. They had a volume on Caucasians, Chinese and Hawaiians, Koreans, Puerto Ricans, Filipinos, Japanese, and Portuguese. And so excerpts from 5 of the oral history interviews will be shared this late evening or late afternoon. And I wanted to say mahalo to the staff who conducted the oral histories, led by the first director, Chad Taniguchi, and his assistant, Gail Govea. I want to now introduce Tai Kavika Tengan, who is the chair of our Department of Ethnic Studies, and he's the professor of the North Shore Ethnographic Field School, which is conducting contemporary oral histories, once again, this time with members of the Waialua community.
O Waialua kai leo nui uolono ka uka holi ue mai karani o ka pailoa ua paina malihini ne iaina e he aku ana noi e komo me ke alohala mai kuli ka leo e leo no ke ga Thank you all for joining and being a part of this. It's so exciting watching really familiar names pop up in the waiting room and others who I'm looking forward to sharing, being a small part of sharing the mo'olelo of Waialua. As Deviana said, my name is Tai Kavika Tengan. I'm originally from Maui, but am now living in Palolo, where there's a lot of construction and chickens. So if that goes off in the background, sorry, but that's where I live. I'm the chair of ethnic studies. I'm also jointly appointed in ethnic studies and anthropology. And the origins of this field school actually started within archaeology, an effort to partner with Kamehameha Schools, who has sponsored this endeavor since 2012. First few years, we're teaching students how to do kind of responsible community-based archaeological work, working at Kupopolo Heiau, and then at a habitation site, a Kauhale site at Uko'a. That went on 5 years. And then in 2017, we kind of transitioned to really focus on oral histories and to help the community record the mo'olelo, the stories of their elders. And it's been a really great honor to be a part of this. We are in our 4th year now, and unfortunately, because of the pandemic, won't be doing any new interviews. But the Haumana, some of whom are on here now, will be working to help create this archive based on all the previous oral histories that have been done, and perhaps to create a new kind of podcast such as you hear today, but from the interviews that we've done. So it's really exciting to connect across these genealogies. I want to acknowledge the 22 narrators that we've had between 2018 and last year. One of whom is joining with us today, 2 of whom are joining with us today. Keith Awai, he and his mother, Auntie Kanani, were part of that first 2018 group. Uncle Leif Anderson, who's with Tehani, he was a part of the second group of Kupuna narrators. We've also had Francis Forsyth, Herbert and Mary Chun, Jock Sutherland, Emmeline Causey, Vanderlyn Anana, George A.E., Gay Timon, Frank and Leilani Pereira, Diane Cannon, Judy Miram, who's on the call. I see you, Auntie Judy. Kenneth Souza, Alfred Alameda, Kimo Lyman, Lois Pakoba, John Hirota, Kenneth Sagawa, and Moki Labra. And Moki has a special place as someone who from the very beginning, when we were doing archaeology, was helping to give us good cultural and spiritual advice. There's also a number of other staff members who are on the call. One of our first Kumu, Malia Evans, really glad to see her joining. Keola Silva, the 2 of them from the very beginning helped to anchor us. Malia being a very active member of the community, though from Hilo, where she went back to now. And then Keola, one of the kupa of Waialua. Along with so many others who helped the kokua. Kanoi Wong, who was a student in 2018, went on to get her master's in oral history, is now a kumu for the field school. Kavika Hostelero, one of our ethnic studies majors. I saw him on, I didn't see if Komaka's on yet, another important kumu, Komaka Anai, Ulise Funaki, and Shelby. Blanking, sorry. But Shelby and Ulise being our current GAs right now. So without any further ado, really this time is to acknowledge those voices of the kupuna that we are going to engage with now. Briefly, to introduce our panel, we have Keith Owai. Uncle Keith was born on Oahu in 1953. At age 5, moved to Waialua and remembers growing up in a tight-knit community, which changed quite a lot since the closing of the plantation, as families who were from there moved out and newcomers moved in. His family is rooted in music, and as you got to hear briefly in the very beginning, this is something that is passed on in the ohana. And his real passion also is hula. He is a kumu hula. And he worked for a number of years at the Polynesian Cultural Center, and after retirement continues to be committed to Hawaiian culture and hula, and is also a member of the Waialua Hawaiian Civic Club, who was our key community partner, and I want to acknowledge them and their support and sponsorship. And I see Maka Casson Fisher, who's also in the room. So mahalo to the Waialua Hawaiian Civic Club. Tehani, Louis-Perkins, was one of our community volunteers who served as basically a student, but really someone who helped keep us in check. She and her mother, Tisha, back in the 2019 year. She's from Pa'ala'akai, Waialua, graduate of KS, and currently a second-year law student who aims to get certificates in Native Hawaiian and environmental law. In addition to going to KS, she also went to Whitman College, where she got a degree in biology and environmental studies, and currently sits on the North Shore Neighborhood Board. And I believe right now is at the Waialua Community Association building, along with another Waialua Community Association member and North Shore Neighborhood Board member, Uncle Leaf Anderson. And I have a very long intro for Uncle Leaf, but I'm just gonna condense it to the point where his great-grandparents migrated to Hawaii from Norway. Your grandfather came to Waialua eventually to open one of the first banks there. And Uncle Leaf himself, who has a long history on the Aina, both in ranching as well as with the Waialua Sugar Company. Very active today in the community, also a long time in the National Guard, and well-renowned craftsman of ukulele, and his home on the Hula River, the family compound, really a special historic site that is just full of stories of mo'olelo that our students were able to gather when we got to interview him. So really glad Uncle Leaf could join Tehani to be a part of this discussion. So with that, I will pass it on now to Lurleen, who is a freelance journalist, producer of documentaries, and scriptwriter until recently with Hawaii PBS Insights, as well as author of the novel Between the Deep Blue Sea and Me. She's woven together a series of excerpts from our Center for Oral Histories Archive of Oral Histories, which Daviana had just introduced, those done in '76, the very first set of interviews for this podcast, and we'll share now. So mahalo, Lurleen McGregor.
Aloha.
Aloha.
O wau Lurleen Wailana McGregor, mai Alewa Heights, mai. So before I begin, I just want to elaborate a little bit on the brief history that Daviana gave of Waialua. It first became a sugar cane plantation in 1865, but it was not very successful until Castle and Cook bought it 33 years later in 1898. At that time, they put in a new mill, they put in a railway system, they added water storage, and they installed irrigation systems. And after that, it became one of the most productive sugar plantations in Hawaii. And 100 years later, they were producing 8% of all the sugar produced in Hawaii. In 1996, which was 131 years after the sugar mill opened, the plantation opened, it was the last plantation to close in Hawaii. And as Daviana said, the relative isolation of Waialua meant that change came more slowly than in other Oahu communities, especially those closer to town. And while the experiences of the Waialua community are similar to other communities, they're also very unique, as you'll hear. So these interviews, the excerpts, as we've talked about, were all conducted during the summer of 1976. And just to give you a little heads up, they were taped at a time when the equipment was not as good as it is now. Now we have directional microphones, we have digital quality. Back then they used tape, And since then, the tape has degraded. You know, also the microphones caught all the lawnmowers and all the other noise going on at the time. So I say this because I was unable to use some excerpts because they were just too hard to hear. The tape degraded. But the good news is that all these interviews have been transcribed and they're available online. And you can contact the Center for Oral History to find them. So what you're going to hear are just 3-minute pieces from 5 different people. But these interviews, you know, they lasted well over an hour and they're just very, very fascinating. So at least for today, we have subtitles to help with the undistinguishable audio. So our first interviewee is Lorna Awai Berger, who was born in Waialua in 1905. Her Hawaiian mother was from Lahaina, and her Hawaiian Chinese father, who was the jailer, was born in Waialua. She was one of 12 children in her family, attended Waialua Elementary School, and then left Waialua at age 14 to attend McKinley High School. And she finished her education in Greeley, Colorado. Growing up, she came home weekends, but after leaving home, she didn't actually move back to Waialua until 1965. And during her career, she taught at Kalakaua, Farrington, and Manoa schools. And she enjoyed playing Hawaiian music and singing, which she sometimes did professionally with her family.
We had our own taro patches. And there was a time that one of my brothers even had a rice plantation. I think he had about 5 acres. Because the back of Haleiwa is all farmland, taro and hasu, because, and then there's a spring, you know, in the back, which used to feed our taro patches and rice fields. Saturday was our poi day. We made enough poi. Actually, I think we had 2 barrels that were about 3/4 full of poi, which lasted the family for a whole week. We children had to go and do other chores like taking the horses down to be bathed right across the way at the beach. And then we had to do other chores like getting the wood into the kitchen, into the wood bin, or clean the lamps, lanterns, fill them up with oil, wash the chimneys, put them away before we could go and play. Or swim for the rest of the day.
Did you pick limu and things like that when you were kids too with your mother?
Limu fishing, we went ʻopihi fishing. Oh, we did everything that the old folks did.
Did they have big ʻopihis in this
Oh
area?
yeah, all along here.
By
No,
Waimea.
all the way. In fact, we would go from here to just a little ways up, enough.
And they were good
And they were
size?
good size.
Oh, for heaven's sake.
Good size of bee. And we'd have to go early in the morning when the tide is low, and we just dive, all around and take whatever we want. But no more. You can go all day and you find
Right.
one.
If you're lucky. And a little
And the
tiny one.
fishing is the same. Fish holes were destroyed by these divers putting Clorox in it. Once they do that, the fish don't come back.
Did you folks make your own salt?
We gathered our own. Every summer, we would go to Waimea. The reef, the shoreline, was taken for the army when they were building the roads during the war. And so much of the reef is gone. But anyway, we used to go up there, and we had our own little pool. Each family had their own section. August or July, depending on how hot the sun was, you'd have these beautiful flakes. We made enough salt to last us the year. As time went on and more people came and the military started going to the beach, we didn't know whether the pools were clean. Somebody could have kapulu'd it,
Yeah. Right.
And we used to find beer cans in the pool, so we stopped going.
So Kumu Keith, Lorna Berger is your auntie, right?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
He's my.
Can you comment about what we just heard?
No, when I Auntie speak, by the time I had come to Haleiwa, all those things are pow. It didn't exist anymore. But we did do similar things. We picked up limu, although our limu was very limited to ogo, which was abundant, and limu ele that grew. And limu ele grows a lot where you have spring water coming and meeting the ocean. And that's a long stringy limu that's really good with stew. And then, like we mentioned earlier, most of the taro patches were turned into hasu patches. One funny thing about living in different areas, I had cousins that came from Honolulu, and when they came out to the country for the first time, when you go to a taro patch, especially those that are cleared, sometimes they have a white, green kind of moss growing over the top. And a lot of my cousins thought that was grass. So they would run and take a leap, not knowing that they ended up in the taro patch. They thought they were running on a field of grass. So, we used to get scolding all the time because we didn't tell my cousins, don't run over there because that's not grass, but things like that. And we did pick up ʻopihi, not that much though, but more we picked up pipipi, the small little black that we ate. That was common for us, as well as haukiuki, which was kind of abundant. Auntie talked about making poi at the big house. We call it the big house where they were raised. The poi house still stands. It's all kind of dilapidated. So the family is deciding whether they should, redo it or what to do, just because of the history of it, the poi house. Yeah, and Auntie talked about singing. She and her brothers did entertain at the Haleiwa Hotel. That was part of their entertainment thing at that time, back then when the hotel was in business. And then of course, everything has changed because of all the different people that have moved in. So what was once like many other areas or plantation towns that were united by the plantation, that was a common bond. Now it's so diverse, so we're a different type of community. And I, we're not prejudiced people, but on the North Shore we have the North Shore Arts Festival, and when you go there, most of the people there that are selling goods are from the mainland, originally from the mainland, and it's a big event. And when it comes to Hawaiian events, they're a lot smaller with Hawaiian makes and things like that, and so that shows you how much things have changed as far as that kind of cultural stuff is concerned. Yeah, but I learned a little bit how to weave lauhala. So as a young boy, I don't remember my grandma weaving a lot because she was a school teacher, but we did help gather lauhala for her. And I remember I kind of hated it because sometimes she sent us to climb in the tree to pick the leaves, and when you pick it, all the rubbish falls on top of you. Yeah, and I used to go, I want to do this, but we did that, and those are some of the memories I have. My grandparents' wives quite a few were educators. Auntie Lauren was a teacher. My grandfather was a teacher. Her two sisters were teachers, and they taught here in the Waialua area. And at that time too, families, a lot of things, like I know my grandpa said that they raised pigs to sell. They had taro. They sold poi. I remember my mom ironing for people. That was another. And I don't know if you remember the old starch you had to cook on the stove. You had to actually cook the starch on the stove, soak your clothes inside, and then when it's time to iron, you get the Coca-Cola bottle with that little shower sprinkler thing, and you have to put it on the clothes and all things that. In fact, we still have the kerosene iron that my mom used to use at one time in our goodie Goody Place. Yeah, we have that. But those are some of the memories and differences that I can recall compared to what Auntie talked about. Yeah.
Oh, mahalo. Mahalo for sharing. Okay, moving on to the second interviewee is Patrick Arnold Jack Wong. He was born in 1899 in Papaiʻiko on Hawaii Island. His father emigrated from China in the 1880s, and the family moved to Waialua after Patrick was born, where his father became an interpreter for W.W. Goodall, the first manager of Waialua Sugar Company when it became under Castle and Cook. Patrick left Waialua to attend St. Louis High School and next attended the University of Dayton. He next moved to Hong Kong and then Brazil, and in 1953 he returned with his family to Hawaii and worked for the American Security Bank until he retired.
Can you describe what your father did exactly for Mr. Goodale?
Oh, he was just a simply interpreter. Whenever there's anything to be done, where they require an interpretation, all my father. And then my father has a shop, only about a few hundred yards from the sugar mill. And in Waialua at that time, on the Waialua side, not far from the Waialua school, there used to be a Chinatown there. There used to be a Chinatown when Chantim was there, when that Yihop was there. And then further over in Haleiwa, there's a Yi Chan, the store. There was even the Chinese drugstore and Chinese restaurant and so forth around Waialua. And then they have another Chinese shop near the bridge over in Waialua, just below the bridge there. I remember that well. You see all Chinese talking, and then they play paikao.
Were there rice plantations?
Yes, the rice plantation is Mokoleia and Kauai Hapai. They import water buffaloes and import all the implements for cultivating rice from China. They have those old things. Oh yes, we used to go there.
Wasn't that quite expensive to bring?
No, in those days it's not expensive at all. That's why they could afford it. That's only a short distance from our house.
Oh.
Yeah, Mokoleia. That's where the rice used to go over the states. Not like now, coming from the states.
Did they used to sell some locally too?
Oh yes, yes. We used to sell them those rice, and we used to buy.
Did most Chinese work for the plantation or work outside the plantation?
Mostly work for the plantation, except a few that do their own planting.
What kind of crops?
Or Chinese vegetables. Bitter melon and kai choy and things like that. Big vegetable gardens. Oh yes. I remember around Waialua, before we go to the second bridge, there's a big area where they plant all kinds of vegetables. Yeah.
Were the Chinese planting taro?
Oh yes. Oh yes. Planting taro and this, what you call, lotus root. Plenty of that. I remember those things.
And then eventually most of the Chinese left. Or did they die?
They die, and then the children refuse to do that kind of work, and then they come out, they get a better education, they do something else.
Okay, we're going to move right to the next interviewee, who's Alfred Santiago. He was born in Honolulu in 1908. His father came from Puerto Rico, and he married a Portuguese woman from Hawaii Island. His father died when Alfredo was 8 years old, leaving him to care for his mother and 3 younger siblings until she remarried a year later. Alfredo quit school after the 4th grade and began working for the Waialua Sugar Company in 1923.
What was your first job?
Oh, I was in a boy gang. They used to call them the boy gang. You know, you pick up the scrap of the cane and pile it up. The women's, they had women with us together, see? And then we load the cane cars with a step ladder. And then from there I rode up till I got into the harvesting, driving mules. pulling cane out, see. And I stood there for quite a while, and then from there, I went to the locomotives as a brakeman. I stood there for a while, I went back to the harvesting, and that's where I ended up.
When you first started to work in 1923, do you have any idea how many people might have been employed by the plantation?
Oh, I think over 1,000.
Over 1,000.
But they don't have that today.
No, they don't need that many today.
Cotton cane only had 150 men, and the loaders had 150. They don't have, where that man went, we don't know. They're all out. It's not that the plantation threw them out, but was job elimination. See? Gradually, they improved themselves, how to get things done. So the man kept on going. Even the Puerto Ricans, where they went, most they went to Oakland, all to the mainland. See? Haywood, Oakland, they're all back there now. Most.
If there were still jobs for them here, because this plantation never laid anybody off.
No.
If there were still jobs for them here, why do you think they left?
Well, I don't know. They just probably thought the mainland was better, and they took off.
What kind of house did you get on the plantation? Do you remember?
Well, the houses wasn't so bad. The house that we had 3-bedroom, parlor, and kitchen. Of course, the toilet was outside, like the olden days. The only time we had pipe in the kitchen was only for cooking. No such thing as that you could take a bath in the house. You had to take a bath in a wash house outside.
What did you eat for breakfast?
Well, breakfast most we used to, before I leave the house, just only take a cup of coffee and maybe some bread with, butter or something.
Where did the coffee come from?
Well, most times the coffee used to come that some of us used to go pick it up, see,
Where?
up in the mountains,
Yeah.
and then we used to fix them home, dry them, and then my mother used to roast them, and then she used to grind them with a grinder, and then she makes powder out of it. See, not like now, more on the powder side. And then she used to get the strainers. She make the hot water and put the coffee inside, so many spoons. And she got another tea kettle where she pour it and run the water through that bag, and then turns to the, makes coffee.
And where in the mountains?
Way up in the mountain. Ooh, it's way up.
Which side of Waialua?
Waialua. We used to go up, way up, go pick it up, put them in bags. And my stepfather they had a horse, and then we used to load them on a horse, bring them down. Then after a while, of course, the coffee started to come from Kona and all that. See?
Those coffee trees are still there?
Oh,
the
yeah,
mountain?
they're still there.
Do you go get coffee?
No,
from
not
there
now, not now.
Why not?
Because why you buy it in a store now? You don't have to.
Easier.
Them days was was better off to pick it and make it than go out in the store and buy it.
Yes, well, more easy to just go buy it. So let's take a little break and hear from Tehani. Would you like to comment on the last couple of interviews we just heard?
Sure. Aloha, everyone. Thanks for having us. Uncle Leaf's currently trying to blend in with the background. But I think just the different stories or the mo'olelo that they both shared about their lives really speaks to what kind of community it was. And I didn't grow up in the plantation time. I'm a product of post-plantation era, but I did grow up hearing a lot of stories and a lot of people, a lot of kupuna, even my parents and stuff talk about what it was like to grow up or the stories they had heard. And even I think it's interesting, and I think this is why interviewing people and doing oral histories is so important, because I would have never known there was a Chinatown in Waialua. There's no remnants of that. And I think I even went and told my friends after listening to that, I was like, did you know there was a Chinatown in Waialua? And they're like, what are you talking about? I was like, no, I'm serious. It was in an interview, and people don't know. And that's why it's so important for, I think, people my age, and as it continues on, to hear these stories, because as Uncle Keith has mentioned before, and even before when we started this event, that our community is just rapidly changing. And I would like to say, saved from change for a long time, because there wasn't any, who lived so far away. But I think it's important that we, it's just changing really fast, even within my lifetime. And so I can't even imagine what it's for people who who are kupa aina, who have seen the change, who have these mo'olelo of this aina and this place, and how hard it is for their families too. So mahalo, everybody.
Okay, mahalo. Okay, we'll continue on with the next interviewee. His name is David Mahoy. He was of Hawaiian and Japanese ancestry, which was kind of rare in those days. He was born in Haleiwa in 1910. And for those of you who have lived there forever, there have been at least 5 generations of Mahoys from Haleiwa. He attended Haleiwa Elementary and Lelehua High School, and then he dropped out from school during the Depression. He was one of the few Hawaiians to work for the Waialua Sugar Company.
Do you ever remember Queen Liliuokalani coming down to the summer house down here? Or?
No, I was too small at that time, I think. I don't remember, but my mother told us where she would come. Right down there by the garage now. That building is no more. She used to come with her maid and everybody. That's a summer resting place.
So tell me about now how you got the food or the main things that were in your diet. You of course ate a lot of poi.
Yeah.
What else did you eat when you were a little kid?
Summer month there, the Awama, it's Awama.
Yeah.
Awama and Moili are plentiful during the summer month. So early in the morning they would wake us up, go down there, we surround one time, just enough for maybe a couple of days, maybe 3-4 days, and then we go again for get some more.
Did you dry the fish, or just eat them right then?
They cook it, and majority of it they have to fry them. They salt it and fry them. Dry it up. No? Otherwise, it wouldn't last. No more ice box. Yeah?
Right. So most of the way you preserve things was drying.
Drying, right? Yeah. Even it's opu too. Opu. That fish only come when the mountain have heavy rain during the winter months. And that fish come down with the water. See? Yeah, about this big, but a lot of bone. Everybody used to go when after the water is calm down, slow flowing. All the kids used to go hooking. It's a lot of fun, and that fish too we cook and dry it up too.
Did you have a garden or raise vegetables too?
Most Hawaiian they hardly have garden, no. Only the Oriental. Yeah. Yeah, so only 2 major festivals they use.
I wasn't that aware of that until now that I've talked to more Hawaiians. That's true. They didn't really introduce vegetables in their diet till later, till after more Japanese influence, I guess.
That's right. The only other kind is seaweed kind, but that's not vegetable, no.
Do you remember in 1920, the flu epidemic? You were still a little boy then, but do you remember that?
My family, I don't know we lost, I don't know how many of them. But as a whole, the Japanese was the hardest, hitting the hardest,
At the time with the Japanese
strikes.
Right. Everybody was living together. One family living in one room. How many people? Just really with Hawaiians, they used to live Portuguese, anybody there. That's why they would die. Every day somebody was dying.
What about your family? Did any of them get sick?
Yeah, we all got sick, but somehow we didn't. no life was lost.
Okay, we're going to move right to the 5th interview. Emigdio Kabiko. He was born in 1909 in the Philippines, and he emigrated to Hawaii when he was 17 years old, and that was in 1926. And he was recruited to come to work at the Waialua Sugar Company. And he was assigned to work in the company's store because he could speak English. And he became a plantation store manager after 10 years before starting his own store.
In 1926, not much people yet. So they start coming in 28, 29, period like that. So since everybody's young, 17, 18, 20, 21, They like to play. So we went around the camp, in each camp, convinced them that why don't you make a team in your place? And we challenge each other. So those who are smart how to play volleyball, they make a team volleyball. Those who make smart in baseball, they make team baseball. So in each camp, they got volleyball team and baseball team. And every Sunday in the park, we have a baseball park, big crowd, because we challenge in each camp. We challenge. I do the score and I do the planning and everything. Which team gonna play? So that's what we do those days. And sometimes, of course, those who are wanted to play volleyball, they make their own team. So when Saturday night, we challenge in each camp. So what we did, so that we have something to show to the people. If we agree, the loser will buy 5 cases of soda water. And then you have to pass all around the people. So that's what they used to do. Same thing with the volleyball. The loser had to buy everything. So whatever they decided, 10 cases soda water and donut, if 10 dozen donuts, whatever they agree. After the game, everybody's full, because they get donuts, pastry, and drink like that. But there's no liquor, no liquor, only soda water.
Oh, in each camp.
In each camp.
So, did they have any like different ethnic, ethnic group teams like that, like Japanese teams?
No, there's none. There is none. The Japanese, they have a baseball.
And they play among themselves.
They play among. Well, they play every rural, all the Japanese team.
Oh,
all the Japanese team. We cannot compete them because they're too good. They are already, too good. But like us, we just learning and we just practice only among ourselves. That's the only recreation we have before. The plantation was so kind enough that they make a clubhouse in the camp. Tira. We have a tira once a week. We pay only 10 cents. That's all we pay.
To see a movie.
To see a movie in the camp. And then later on, after that, they make a big gymnasium. Then after that, they make a swimming pool. Then tennis court. Some of the young boys, they learn any kind of sport, any kind. Tennis and also swimming. Oh, we used to learn how to swim too in a swimming pool.
Turn it over to Ty now.
Mahalo, Darlene. Before we kind of get to a broader discussion, I did want to invite Uncle Leaf to join in here and kind of comment on anything that struck you. When I was listening to a number of them, I thought about your own history and connection, and so I'd just love to hear any manat you'd like to share.
Yeah, I found it quite interesting to listen to some of that stuff. They always talked about, in a plantation, you had your Chinese camp, your Japanese camp, your Portuguese camp, Filipino camp, and I never really knew where the Chinese camp was, but I know, the graveyards, and that was kind of interesting. And talk about going up to the mountain and picking up coffee, and we used to always go pick it up, but not for me. I would go with somebody else, and they would take it home. The same thing with the fishing and picking up limo, and I was fortunate that I hung out with all the local guys, the Hawaiians, that they ate that stuff. I never really learned how to eat it too good. I munched on it, but right now I don't eat it. But I remember vividly and yet vaguely going to the hukilau down at Waimea Bay. The whole community would get together and put all their net together and go and make a big hukilau at Waimea. And whoever was there, you take whatever you want, but don't take extra, you know what I mean? And that was the agreement. You take what you want, take what you need. And then And I know one of the guys that was by my dad, and they told my dad, go take some fish. And my father grabbed a couple of fish and, no, go take some more. And my father said, no, that's all I need. And, at 5 years old, you're thinking, oh, why? But then later on, you learn that you only take what you need. If you don't need no more, leave them for the rest of the guys. And that I learned, and just it all brings back memories, especially plantation stuff. And talking about the swimming, I was just telling Tehani, my dad was on the swim team for Waialua, and their swimming, their races were held in Honolulu, right by the bridge. And they would race, I don't even know where, but on certain days, my dad and his friends would go by the bridge and dive for coins, and from the people, the guests at the hotel. And last night at the meeting, we were commenting about how the kids are getting on the bridge right now. It's creating an issue, and I was thinking, I'm kind of tossed on both sides of this thing, because my whole family, from my father to my grandchildren, jump on the bridge, but now there's so many kids, it's creating an issue, and I feel so bad about saying that, yeah, it's an issue. And but yeah, there's so much, and like I say, the more people in the circle, the better the stories get.
Mahalo, Uncle Leaf. And I also do want to acknowledge Aunty Judy Miram, who is another one of our Kupuna narrators. And I don't want to put you on the spot, Auntie, but if you wanted to share, I wanted to invite you to, since you really kind of helped our own field school in so many ways, not only by sharing your own story, but those of your ohana. So Auntie, you want to jump in, Auntie? Do you know how to unmute yourself? You're going to have to go move the cursor on the bottom, then hit the... Hey.
Yeah, I'm learning. Okay. No, these stories are really interesting, especially talking about the pocket camps and the pocket stores. I remember when we used to go visit my grandpa's house. My great grandfather came from China and lived in the area where the North Shore Marketplace is now. Akung was a blacksmith, and it wasn't until about 2 or 3 years ago we learned that he used to take care of Queen Liliuokalani's carriages. And we didn't realize that one of her carriages was still on the property when Uncle Tin Fun, who was my grandpa's brother, moved away from that area because they were going to build the shopping center. And I feel really like ho because there's history sitting in Uncle Tin Fun's property that was there. I mean, there was only a small bridge across the ditch that separated my grandpa from Uncle Tin Fun, but Uncle Tin Fun lived on the property that Akung had his blacksmith shop on. And it's so sad that we find out later that things that could have been of historical value to Haleiwa, because my kuku was one of the first members of Liliuokalani Church when they first established. But there's, the stories about the Chinese restaurants and the Chinese stores. There's, every time I hear stories like this, my brain is working overtime, but my mouth cannot keep up with with what I'm thinking because there's so much history there. When they're deciding to build a North Shore marketplace, one of the owners of I think it was the Napa Auto Shop, invited my mom to the groundbreaking because he found out that my grandpa was living on a property where they were going to build a store, and she was excited, but she was also nervous because I guess we don't really understand the historical value until after the fact. But living along on the Hula River for most of my life, we just, I guess, as a kid, we just take it for granted that this is how things are. Now when we think about it, Keith was talking about boiling starch on the stove. Um, I still do that for my jeans. And you can starch your pants. I know my brother always used to say, when the pants can stand up by itself, then it's done. If it's not, do it again. And it's hard to find pocket starch that you can cook on the stove anymore. But tapioca starch, really, tapioca starch, but we ironed, we did our laundry like that. We didn't know what poor was. Now they tell us we were poor. We had we had clothes on our back. We had food. My mom used to take care of them. She used to repair nets for the fishermen. So we got fish and corn crab. When we got corn crab, it was like Christmas again, and we ate everything. I mean, nothing got thrown away. You eat everything in the back until all you have is the shell. But Keith was talking about limo ele ele, um, opai, oopu. I mean, that was part of our diet, and we never thought anything about it. If you wanted to go swim, you take your clothes off and you jump in the water. And when you put your clothes on, go and get lickings because you're not supposed to go swim. But those things bring back memories, and to hear of things that happened way before we came along, and how are these memories gonna keep the next generations going? I always talk to my kids about it. Ma, but that's the same thing I said to my dad. Yeah, Dad, I know. Yeah, I know. Yeah, 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 yeah. You said that already, but now my kids are telling me the same thing. So I'm trying to tell my great grandchildren about how we used to live. You walk from Haleiwa to Waimea Falls, and you eat the dates and the plum that was growing along the highway. We didn't even know the road had a name. You just went over there on the highway, and you walk in a group or you hitchhike, and one person go out to hitchhike and everybody else hides in the bushes. And when a car stops, everybody run to the car. And you know that was a part of life. But you know, I don't live in Haleiwa anymore. But when I go down, it hurts to see the changes. And I tell my kids, this is where my grandpa lived. Um, a coon planted one of those monkey pod trees in the North Shore marketplace when he first came to China. I mean, when he came from China. His brother lived across the street where a true lane is now, and he had his taro patch there. And talking, we've been doing genealogy work, and one of my cousins, his grandfather was the Achu that had the rice patches down there. So all of these things, so we always say, Achoo! Yeah, that was us. That was our family, but there's so many. Kavika, I can go on and on and on and bore everybody out of their chairs. But there is a lot of historical value in Haleiwa, Waialua, even Kawailoa. I mean, you don't hear everybody talking about Kawailoa because it's not there anymore. But we learned how to. We had a swimming team. Mr. Pady was one of our coaches, Mr. Nakamura, and my dad. We trained in Haleiwa, in Anahulu River, and then when we were going for competitions, we would train in the swimming pool at Kawailoa Gym. And of course, when we got older and worked in the pineapple fields, we would go up there. Of course, by then the gym was closed, so we would climb over the fence and jump in the water with our dirty pineapple red dirt, you know, and swim. And we never got into trouble for it. We knew it was wrong, but it was fun, you know. So there is historical value, and the old plantation camp above Waimea Bay, and you know, stretching all the way down to Kawailoa. So I don't know, Kavika, I don't know where to stop. I know I know I have to stop, but
no, Auntie, this is wonderful, and Auntie, this is actually exactly where I was gonna go with the first question for everyone. But it's really this question of change and the transitions that you've all seen in your lifetimes. And I know Uncle Keith, you started mentioning that earlier, and now you, Auntie Judy, too. But if you're to reflect back on, you know, the times that you lived there, and Uncle Keith, you mentioned things like the different marketplace and different ways of valuing Hawaiian things. And Auntie, you talking, you know, about people really having these relationships and knowing one another. And what do you see as some of the biggest transitions and changes in your own lifetime? Because when we look back at these oral histories, they're talking really in similar ways that we're talking right now. And it was funny because I had Tehani and Keola, or we had him for our field school, and in their short lives, they see, you know, their own kinds of changes that they're tracking. So, you know, I want to kind of bring it around back to you, Uncle Keith, and give you another chance to comment. And I know you gave us that one example already, but are there other kind of important changes, transitions that you've seen you want to kind of comment on, and we can come back around to the others. Mahalo. Uncle Keith? Okay, Uncle Keith, I think we got to unmute you. Here. Michael, can you help him?
Yeah, I got him.
Oh,
sorry. Yeah, you know, our parents didn't have to worry about things like us walking to school and being in danger. You know, everybody knew each other. I think one of the big things for me was that we all understood that all adults could tell you what to do, and they were correct, they were right. And I remember when we go to school, my father said to the teacher, my kids act up, you lick them. When they come home, they will get licking again. But what I think lacks today that really was strong at the time was common courtesies. Everybody just was taught common courtesies. That was really important. I think besides the plantation holding everybody together, back then too, and was mentioned how churches were important. Most Hawaiians went to Kalavina Church, like Lili Okalani. Hawaiian families had the Pule Ohana. That's where everybody really learned how to sing together as a group. It was in family circles like that, you know. And most Hawaiians went to Kalavina. Most of the Filipinos went to the Catholic Church. Of course, Japanese had their, you know, their temple stuff. So, and within that beautiful decor of differences, but yet similar things was, I think, what made communities like Waialua and other plantation communities really, really unique. Auntie Judy, this doesn't have to do with Waialua, but it has to do with my family. My auntie, my father was raised in Waiuhino in Ka'u on the Big Island. And my auntie was saying that she and her cousin would play in this car that her grandfather or grandfather or somebody had in the garage. And they never used a car, but she said it was a big car. The inside had red velvet, and they used to play in the car. Then she came to find out that car belonged to Queen Liliuokalani. And my great-grandfather was one of her drivers. And she said, and we used to play in the car like it was nothing. Just things like that. And two of those cars were made from what I understand. Queen Liliuokalani had one, and Kamokila Campbell had the other. But that kind of history in family was really something to us. Yeah, but I think that's the biggest, was just the safety factor. We all lived during a time where you go to somebody's house. Most of the time, the key was in the car. Nobody took the key out of the car. Nobody's house was locked. Everybody just respected each other for in that term of existence. Yeah, but those are some of the things that I like to share and recall.
Mahalo nui, so wonderful. Tehani and Uncle Leaf.
I think for me, it kind of goes along the same factors of, it's funny because I can remember specifically the age I was when I wasn't allowed to continue riding my bike around by myself. So like, even though, for everybody else, Uncle Keith and Auntie Judy, also, hi Auntie Judy, nice to see you. But they talk about how there's a safety factor, but even when I was growing up, when I was younger, it was still relatively safe to do things by yourself. And, I could walk on the street, for example, like after I was done pulse surfing, I would walk with my board home because we didn't live super far away from Ali'i Beach. And there was always like some uncle being like, hey girl, you need a ride, or like whatever, like telling me hi, people coming home from work. And it wasn't a big deal. Like it wasn't a big deal to walk home by yourself. It wasn't, you knew everybody, and today now I can't even say that as much because like the demographics of Waialua and Haleiwa have just changed so drastically. Like even for myself, like when we had to move, because we used to live in, it was called Fresh Air Camp. We lived over there. And so we had a house over there, and it's just like slowly you could see the Hawaiian families and the local families having to move out and being replaced with, and like Uncle Keith was saying earlier, how we're not prejudiced or whatever, but I mean, this is the truth. Like military, people from the mainland or the continental United States and just different places were just replacing like Hawaiian families, Japanese families, people who had lived there, who had owned their homes, but who just couldn't afford it because the costs were going up. And that's nothing new in Waialua and Haleiwa, and it's continuing, and people are being displaced, and I think, and that's something that's happening really fast for all of us. Like the change to me, change has been happening constantly. And as you can see from Auntie Judy's stories, Uncle Keith and Uncle Leaf's and everybody else who spoke, it's really changing. But I think when they really, to me, in my personal mind, when I saw it take off was when they developed Haleiwa again, or when they added that new shopping center complex. And that was my personal catalyst, or maybe when I became aware, because I was only in high school when that happened. And that's when I started picking up on all these little things like, oh, I don't see, Uncle doesn't live down here anymore. Or they had to move to Vegas, or they had to move to, like different things. And I think it's important that we really try to grasp onto these mo'olelo and, like record them, do something, or have the kupuna come together to talk story. Like Uncle Leaf, and I remember Auntie Judy saying this, and then even Uncle Pocho, who I had interviewed in the field school, he had said that it's important that all the kupuna get together to just have a talk story and share, and just bounce ideas off of each other, because it's hard to just be asked questions and to say everything, especially when you're telling your life story. So I think somewhere in the future we gotta do that just to preserve what we have left. Yeah.
Tehani talked about walking.
Oh, sorry.
Oh,
Going
Tiani
Uncle Keith.
talked about Tiani talked about walking over from Ali Beach. You know, growing up, no, only Waialua Haliva people knew of Ali Beach because it was all bushes. You couldn't see the beach from the road. You had to know where the road was to take you to the beach. So it wasn't a popular place to surf like it is today. You know, so that's some of the kind of changes that we see. Yeah.
Auntie Judy, I'm going to come back to you on Ali'i Beach questions about changes, but let me get to Uncle Leaf first. Uncle Leaf first, and then Auntie Judy, I'll come to you.
Yeah, I wanted to bounce off of it. I wanted to know, you know how they say it takes a community to raise the children. In our days, like Keith said, everybody knew each other, and if somebody told you, "Hey, what you doing? You know, stop what you're doing," or you know, or they see you in trouble, they would give you a hand or something like that. And you know, I remember a lot of times coming home, and my dad would say, "Hey, oh, so and so said he was down there. What he was doing down there?" You know what I mean? And I remember we had the cops in town, and they would stop us. We had curfew, and you know, "Hey, Anderson boy, where you going? You better be going home." Yeah. Okay, you go straight home. And you know, we'd be in Waialua, and "Hey, Andy boy, what you doing?" You know, and then we were under control, and like Keith said, you know, everybody know each other. And my kindergarten teacher was my father's kindergarten teacher, and my fourth grade teacher was my father's classmate. You know, it's kind of, that's how it was. And it was, you know, like he said, you know, it was a safe time. We didn't have, you know, we didn't even know had crime. And we'd take our surfboards and walk down to Waimea. Somebody would pick us up, and either that or we'd walk all the way. You know, if somebody didn't have a truck to take us, you got to walk all the way, and then we'd surf all the way back. And but you know, it was a really good time to grow up, I think. And now you know, we got to watch our grandchildren, because you know, you just don't trust people anymore. And you know, I wish we could go back to those times, but once the plantation shut down, it was like a vacuum. And you know, everything went to money, and that's what everybody saw. And somebody with money just bought into down here because they could see the future opening up. And this is the last frontier, and we're fighting and fighting and fighting to keep it country. And you know, there's just so many outsiders moving in and pushing everybody out. And they come in, and the rent goes up. The people that have been living there for 100 years cannot live there anymore because they can't afford it. And so they move out, and then the people from outside come in because they can afford it, and they take over the show. And it's saddening to see that happen. And you know, when Kamehameha School built that shopping area down there, you know, it really threw off the whole Haleiwa. You know, they kind of wanted to make it look like Lahaina, and it just threw off the whole thing. And it's sad for us to live here, but you know, everybody's looking at that easy dollar. If they would look at lifestyle instead of dollars, it would be a whole different story. But that's how it is. And anyway.
Mahalo, Uncle. You know, I actually had a couple of questions that now you've already touched on about the current developments and the impacts and the response of the community. But Auntie Judy, I want to invite you in to kind of comment on this discussion right now and some of the changes and transitions. And then afterwards, I want to kind of have maybe a final question on what your visions for the future of Waialua are before we wrap up. And I do see, we're kind of coming down towards our last 13 minutes or so here. But Auntie Judy.
Aloha. I was raised along Hula River. When Ali'i Beach, like he said, was a core tree forest. If you didn't know the roads, you didn't know where the beach was. My grandma had a lease on the place from Bishop Estate, and I guess when Bishop Estate decided they were going to make more money if they let the city or the state have the property, we had to move. But I knew when I was growing up that there was a golf course that was left over from Haleiwa Hotel. I always thought that it was an 18-hole course. I was corrected about a year ago. I don't know if I was wrong. I don't know if the person was right, but he insisted that it was only 9 holes. So, if you have a piece of paper that says it was 9 holes, then it was 9 holes. But tomatoes were going wild over there, and we picked up tomatoes and made lomi salmon. And that was the best tomato you could ever use for lomi salmon. But there have been so many different changes. Maybe this is not the right phrase, but it's frightening that Haleiwa has changed so much that when you're born and raised there and you go, like I moved away from the North Shore several years ago, but when you go back there and what happened to this store? What happened to that store? And what's coming next? Is there anything we can do to revitalize or make people understand the historical significance? Haleiwa Waialua Mokuli'i Waimea Kawailua. The impact this area had on the state of Hawaii as a whole, and what is happening to it now. When will it stop? You see houses in Haleiwa that are selling for $1 million. When did that happen? When will it ever stop? I mean, the only thing I see that's still there when I was a kid were some of the date trees that are growing in the park. The big ohia trees that are falling apart. What's next? How can we, I'm 78 years old. There's not too much I can do, but for as long as the Lord is willing, I would like to do something that can bring, I wouldn't say prosperity, but the significance of what this area on this small island and the significance it had to the well-being of the state. My kids say I'm old-fashioned, but I was growing up when, like Keith and Leaf said, when you respected the people around you, not because they're better than you, but because you were taught to respect people for who they are. And, the bank account didn't make too much difference because we didn't know the value of a dollar. And there's so much that's changing that there's a joke that it's not Haleiwa anymore. It's Haleiwa. And, you know, it's not a nice thing to say, but that is the reality. How long will Lilio Kalani Church be there before somebody steps in and sees it as not a place of worship or a place where we lay our kupuna and our family to rest, but will somebody be there to start losing the significance of what this place means to Haleiwa and the people that were born and raised there? I know I'm one of the few that's still left, but what can we do? And Kavika,
You know, Auntie, I want to kind of build off of just what you said. I'll let you finish that, but I mean, this is kind of where I want us to think with this last question is, you know, what's this future that we see, and what can all of us do, and what can you, Kupuna, tell us Mo'opuna and young people to do that we need to be doing? But go ahead, Auntie, finish your monologue, please.
There's I went to a meeting where people are talking about establishing a cultural heritage center. We really, really need something like this for my kupuna. I mean, my mo'opuna, because we can talk about it, but if there's nowhere they can go to see that this was the reality 150 years ago, 50 years ago, 20 years ago, how will they know? Or, you know, you live in Haleiwa, you don't want to go to Manoa or Kalihi or Kailua to learn about this place called Haleiwa. Why can't you stay in Haleiwa, Waialua to learn about the place? You know, I feel like I should kuli because I'm gonna go on a rant pretty soon.
No, mahalo, Anake. And you know, I saw a big heart from Maka from the Civic Club, because he is someone we've been engaged with in trying to really realize that vision when you're talking about a cultural center for the community. You know, we're kind of closing in on the last 5 minutes. I've been seeing some really beautiful comments and questions being offered in the chat. I'm sorry we can't get to them all. So many stories, other people perhaps that we could be interviewing. But these questions already bring us to this point. You know, what do you see as the kind of your closing thoughts for us? Maybe a couple minutes each. Just your closing thoughts on the vision for the future of Waialua, and what you want to see this next generation do to pick up that kuleana. So, Uncle Keith. Oh, sorry. No, I'll come back to you, and then we'll go to Uncle Keith, and then we'll come back to you, Auntie.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, Uncle Keith.
Yeah, I think the challenge we have is that what made us so different back then was just the understanding as a community. We all understood each other, but because the diversity of people and the way they were raised and their values are very different. So people that join us, they have to know really what aloha means, what malama means, what kokua means. They have to just, because right now I think they get more of a commercial explanation of these words, whereas it's concepts and lifestyles, and that's the hard part to teach, because I know a lot of people that come, they say they want to come here and learn the ways of the local people, but they don't. They want to come here and do their own thing. Yes, but I think for the future, that's one of the important things you have to do, is just get these concepts and teach them. So I think Kupuna program helps in the schools. The revitalization of Hawaiian values helps a lot, and like that. Because growing up, especially with your grandparents, you hear words like, mokaki, moi lepo, hia moi, hele, it might, you know, we were at that changing of times where Hawaiian was, you could still hear it, and then when you went through, you didn't hear it at all. And then at one point, it wasn't used at all. I don't think my nephew and nieces ever knew those words, you know. So I think it's all these little things, whether it's Hawaiian, Japanese, whatever. It's these values that you learned, and then because you are culturally sensitive to this, you become culturally sensitive to other people. And I think maybe that's what we have to be culturally sensitive to everyone. I'm going to end with that.
Mahalo, Uncle Keith. Tehani and Uncle Leaf.
Yeah, like Keith says, you know, it's an uphill battle because these people coming in, they want to be part of us, and yet they want to bring what they came from into our backyard. They verbally they want to live our life, but physically and mentally they want to live the way that where they came from. And you know, what they say and what they do is two different things. And you know, I just hope that, you know, we can keep our thumb on it and keep it suppressed as much as we can, because as the lands be sold out, more and more immigrants going to come in, and everything's, you know, there is not going to be any haleiwa. It's going to be haleiwa. But
hey, but Uncle Leaf, not all holidays bad, huh?
I don't know. You know, it depends on where you was born, I think.
Right.
Then I heard who your neighbor, like you know, when we was kids, we used to go over Keith's house and hang out with them and play, and Judy's house with her brother and them, and go jump off see the background right behind us? That's their front door. But yeah, you know, it's because of all these people with a whole lot of money just buying us out, and money talks, you know, not like before where people had their roots set and, you know, they didn't move. But then as the, you know, the kids went to America, went to school and whatnot, met somebody over there, now they pa'a over there. And so nobody's here at home. We might as well sell the place because I'm not coming home already. And, you know, it's just sad that that's actually what's happening. And then somebody else comes here and they build, you know, LA. They want to make Waikiki look like LA, and it's, you know, they don't realize what they're doing.
Mahalo, Uncle Leaf. I know people are starting to sign off because we are at 5:30, but and if you have to go, that's fine. We asking for a survey to be filled out if you can, but we'll try to wrap it up before everyone disappears so that they can also get the last words from Tehani and Auntie Judy. So Tehani, real quick, and then we'll go to Auntie Judy, and then we'll bring it.
Gotcha. I think my response is going to be a little bit fast and radical. If you know me, that's kind of how I am. I like to do many things, and I think, you know, after participating specifically in the field school and listening to everybody's mo'olelo, so I had two uncles, and then my mom, who Kavika had mentioned, also participated and actually interviewed Auntie Judy and Auntie Diane. And so, you know, listening to those mo'olelo and all the other mo'olelo growing up, like I remember crying one night because I was just so mad, and I was sad and like happy that I got to hear stories, but mad. And I don't know if that's what fuels me. I don't know. This is totally recorded, so I apologize for saying that. But, you know, like for me, I think one of the big things we need to do is invest in our community programs. I think that's a huge start, because people, first off, are like where the heck is Waialua? Like they only know Haleiwa and the North Shore, which I think is problematic. They barely know that Waialua High School exists, except for that one time when we made the States and everybody's like, oh, where, Waialua, you mean Kauai? Or like, no, that's not that, you know. So I think we have to invest in our programs. We have to invest in our organizations, whether it's, you know, Loko'ea Fish Pond, the Hawaiian Civic Club, Waialua Hawaiian Civic Club, and just different facets of our community, and to encourage people my age, above me, you know, below me, to get involved, because I think that's the issue, is there isn't a lot of not encouragement, but there isn't a lot of people involved anymore. People are getting older, and that's the way it is. But we need more youth involved. We need more people to be rallying and going to these community meetings, to these workshops, to things like this, so they can understand the importance of our community. And because sometimes, you know, you hear your mom tell you, or you hear your grandma tell you, and you know, you're like, oh, whatever. But then you hear somebody else tell you, or you hear your grandma say it in a different setting, then it becomes like, oh my gosh, this is pressing. So I think investing, I also think, I saw somebody's question, and I just want to briefly touch about like the commodification of Haleiwa in the North Shore. And I think, and I will straight up blame them. This is the surfing industry coming in and doing that. And I, as a surfer, as my father was a professional surfer, I think that's very problematic. You know, and I think the surfing industry also needs to invest in our community and in our programs, because they don't. And sorry, this is me being like but this is the truth. And I think this needs to happen, and we need to mobilize. We need to have programs where our keiki are, you know, Lawai'a programs, our keiki are involved. The Waialua High School is interviewing kupuna, like the students themselves. I think that's what will gain interest. And I have like this book full of ideas, because, you know, I think it's important. I think this is very, very important. Yeah, and I just want to mahalo really quickly everybody for coming on, because I know we're ending the time, and mahalo Auntie Judy, Uncle Keith, and Uncle Leaf, and everybody. So.
Mahalo. Auntie Judy, you want to bring us home here?
I'm not sure what I did. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're good.
Okay. I think when people from the outside come in and ask questions, if you want an honest answer, be prepared. Because I'm not one to tell you what you think the answer should be. If this is black and you say it's white, brought up if in Haleiwa once, and he asked me, what do you think about the changes in here? I said, oh, bro, you don't want me to answer that. He said, why? I said, because I don't think you're ready. And I don't think anybody's ready, because my own family tells me, hey, shut up. You know, but we need to sit down and seriously discuss what can be and what should be without stepping on anybody's toes. Just because you have $1 million, brother, don't come in here and tell me this is the right thing to do, because you're hurting 400 people who are not interested in your money. We're interested in keeping Haleiwa, Waialua, Mokole'ia, Kawai Hapai, Kaena, they're all Haleiwa Waialua. So don't tell me that because you have all this money, the changes you make are gonna benefit us. I highly doubt that. But I want to thank you for allowing me to be a part of the field school for 2 sessions. And
we're gonna count this one as 3.
Don't laugh. Don't laugh. I'll be there. I know where you're gonna be. No, but seriously, we need to sit down and seriously discuss on what is happening. Like Keith said, everybody is moving to America and selling the family place that's been there for 150 years. And now you cannot, I mean, we have a true lane, and that's all we have. We have the monkey paw tree that Akon planted, and that's all we have. If they decide to do another makeover in Haleiwa and they cut the tree down, to me, that is washing away the history that is Haleiwa. Um, I don't know. I think I don't think I can be too rooted in Haleiwa, but I am. I'm not ashamed to say it because my kupuna or my akong from China became a part of Haleiwa. It made it rich, and for however small I can, whatever small step I can take to continue Akung's work or Kuku's work, I would like to do that. And my goal would be to keep Lilio Kalani Church and Lilio Kalani Cemetery a historical part of Haleiwa because it's one of the last places that we can honestly say belongs to Haleiwa. But I thank you very much for allowing me to be here.
Mahalo, mahalo, Auntie. I mean, I think that image of the tree and the roots is so powerful and so appropriate because Haleiwa, Waialua back in the time of those first interviews in '76 up until today is about the abundance, that richness that you're talking about, which is of the land, of people working and planting, making things grow, whether it's food or communities. And so much of what you've shared is really this important source of growth that is helping to root all of us in different ways in Kuleana for this place. So thank you all, Uncle Keith, Awai, Tehani, Louis-Perkins, Leif Anderson, and Judy Miram, two who just got to be pulled into this program at the last minute, but so rich and powerful. And I'll hand it back to Darlene or Daviana or Eichel to close.
Daviana, you want to close?
Well, thank you so much for all of the beautiful memories and striking, that it struck a chord within me, and I could feel your pain, and I could, relate to other areas that I've experienced where we've experienced those kind of changes. And thank you, everyone. I was writing that, you were speaking of Chinese ancestors, and we had, Filipino workers in our oral histories, and the lessons that we learned from that generation, it seems that they came here to become a part of Hawaii, that they learned Hawaiian, they lived and raised their children alongside the children of the Native Hawaiian families. There was intermarriage. There was a lot more of, a feeling of family and community that they assimilated themselves, adapted into. But what I'm hearing from what is being shared is that today, those who come, especially from America, are expecting that we change, that Hawaii change, that Haleiwa and Waialua change to become more American, and are really trying to transform the way of life rather than adapting and the way of life here. I know here on Molokai, people say, just come and visit, spend your money, but go back because we're afraid of that kind of change here on Molokai. But it's, and we always say, don't come and change Molokai, let Molokai change you. And that's what I'm hearing is the sentiment, is how can we share these stories, this heritage, this legacy, these cultural values, so that people who are living there now or moving there now can change, can be changed by the life experience that you have shared with us, rather than trying to change those life experiences. So mahalo nui loa to everyone. And we're going to have our next program is going to be in March with the Judicial History Center, and we're going to be looking at women's role in leadership and politics and education. So thank you so much, and aloha and malama pono. Keep safe and be healthy, everyone. Aloha.